See, lots to celebrate tonight. And so now, a few words about Dr. Anne Frohbieter, about these 50 years of her leadership, her inspiration, and her guidance that we celebrate tonight. But first, a few words about music. In many ways, beautiful, inspiring, innovative, stirring music has always been synonymous with this congregation and its identity. It's wonderful for us to have the opportunity to recognize and congratulate and thank Anne for these 50 years of service to Emmanuel, 50 years of faithful musicianship and love for this temple, for its tradition of musical excellence, for the voices and the magnificent instrument that she has directed and played so masterfully in filling our prayer and our synagogue home with spirit. I want to first offer just a bit of historical perspective and share a few words about the organ in Jewish prayer more broadly. You may know that the organ has had a bit of a controversial legacy in Jewish history. Through no fault of its own, the organ ultimately became the symbol of the division between Reform Judaism from Jewish Orthodoxy. And so this instrument, this beautiful, inspiring, magnificent instrument, evoked powerful, impassioned arguments and reactions, attacks and counterattacks and defenses from across the Jewish world in our country, but most dramatically in Western Europe, where the Reform movement began. Now, those who opposed using the organ in Jewish prayer resisted it for a number of reasons. First, perhaps because of the traditional prohibitions on using musical instruments for worship on Shabbat, but most vigorously because using the organ in Jewish prayer in some circles was seen as an imitation of Christian worship, rather than as an authentic Jewish expression in its own right. And so when he was confronted with this argument against using the organ in his congregation, Rabbi Abraham Geiger, one of the most famous rabbis in early Reform Judaism in Berlin, went to the library and did some reading. He searched through the ancient rabbinic literature and found that there was a description of an ancient instrument that the Israelites used in their worship in the great temple in Jerusalem. This instrument, called a Madrassa, was told to have been powered by wind, produced by enormous sets of bellows, producing sound through a complex system of pipes and stops, which meant to Rabbi Geiger that the Madrassa sounded remarkably similar to an ancient pipe organ. And so he concluded, in responding to his attackers, it was indeed perfectly appropriate for Jews in Berlin to reclaim our ancient heirloom and offer our thanks to our Christian brethren for having cared so lovingly for our ancient Jewish instruments. Now, when Reform Judaism came to America, the organ again became one of the most divisive factors in Jewish life. If you've visited the Jewish community in Charleston, South Carolina, you may be familiar with the synagogue KK Beth Elohim. The congregation is one of the oldest synagogues in the United States. It was founded in 1749, and it became affiliated with the Reform movement when it was founded a century and a quarter later, which made Beth Elohim officially the first Reform synagogue in America. When it commissioned its breathtaking new building, the leadership insisted that the new structure had to include a top-of-the-line organ. That decision ultimately split the congregation apart, resulted in a faction that broke away and formed Congregation Shereth Israel in the early 1840s. Now, as Reform Judaism grew and spread during what's known today as its classical era, congregations came to agree unanimously that even the most ornate synagogue building should be considered incomplete without a fine organ. Just in the short period of time between 1860 and 1868, the number of Reform congregations with organs in their sanctuaries tripled. Well into the first decades of the 20th century, Reform worship prized the organ so highly that dozens of congregations developed the custom to play rhythmic tones on their pipe organs as a substitute for the shofar on the high holidays, believing that the rich tone of a fine pipe organ was more dignified and majestic than the crude sound of a tone produced by the horn of an animal. Today, of course, our magnificent organ and our magnificent organist are part of an expansive and diverse music program here at Emanu. It gives voice to the Jewish soul and the Jewish impulse to prayer in diverse and inspiring ways. Music, thank God, is a deep and pervasive part of the way that we pray and the way we articulate who we are and what we believe. And the diversity of Jewish music here falls perfectly in line with the explosion of diversity in Jewish music all around the world. Just about every instrument and genre you can imagine has been used in Jewish settings. Today there are folk arrangements of Jewish music, of course, but there's also rhythm and blues as well. There's Jewish rap, and there are composers of high-tech Jewish electronica. There's a terrific Australian klezmer band that has a fantastic didgeridoo player, and a guy on YouTube who plays Hava Nagila on the bagpipes. All of this is great news for lovers of Jewish music, but it makes it very difficult to determine what is Jewish music precisely. So to answer that question and to segue to our conversation about Anne, I want to share one last tidbit from history. In the year 1841, in France, the chief rabbi in Marseille used his sermon on Kol Nidre night to defend the use of the organ. And his argument was this: when the ancient Israelites in Babylon were taken into captivity, the psalmist records that they hung up their harps and wept when they remembered Zion. But today, he said, the Jews in France are no longer strangers in a strange land. Jews hang up their instruments and silence their song when we are prisoners, captives, and exiles. But Jewish music is produced when Jews know they are home. The experience of homelessness, of fearful wandering, Jewish music can't come to life in those settings. But when you experience Jewish song that makes your heart leap and your soul speak in poetry, that's the time you know you're home. And so, to Anne, tonight we offer her our thanks because she has treated that great instrument and this magnificent space with love and respect and devotion, but also because if that French rabbi was right, and music is what demonstrates that a Jew has found a home, then it is thanks to Anne that this building is a house of prayer and a home to those who pray. All of this helps us understand why this organ and this organist are so important to us, to our congregation, and to the prayer that we offer together. And it's why it's so significant that Anne's career and the career of our organ have been so tightly and beautifully intertwined. And so now a few words about them. You may know that this particular organ wasn't original to this building. It's about 20 years younger. Originally, worship services here featured a smaller electronic organ. This great Aeolian Skinner pipe organ didn't make its debut until the mid-60s, after Rabbi Kahn and his committee traveled all around Texas listening to dozens of organs before finally concluding that this was the right one and recruiting a team of experts to oversee a historic organ transplant. Shortly after this organ found its way home, Anne was hired by Dr. Michael Horvath, who was the music director here at the time. In his words of tribute to her, he said that Anne is a splendid organist, a gifted musician with a deep understanding of and dedication to the music of the Jewish liturgy. The quality and prayerfulness of the worship services of the temple have benefited profoundly from her contributions. Because of her, he said, the music of Congregation Emmanuel is among the most highly regarded in the country. So Anne has been here 50 years, and so there are at least 50 reasons to recognize her. Her technical expertise and her dedication, her extraordinary skill with the instrument, and her masterful work in directing choral voices, her skill in selecting inspiring pieces for its repertoire. And it's not just this congregation that has been the beneficiary of her skill and her love. She has served numerous other houses of worship around Houston. She served as the dean of the Houston chapter of the American Guild of Organists. Her presence here and her work show us what it means to pray, and she has done so for tens of thousands of other worshipers in this place and in other houses of worship, enabling and elevating their prayer to attain extraordinary new altitudes. That deserves our great thanks and acknowledgement. So, Anne, I'd like to invite you to join me on the bima for just a moment for a couple of gifts and tributes, and to invite you to share a few words as well. The first gift that I have to present to you, here, I'll hand this to you. This is a beautiful gift that comes to you from our congregation and from its leadership. This is a beautiful piece of art that comes to you from Israel, from our Jewish state, our Jewish homeland. The image in this picture is of a harp and two doves, the harp reminding us of King David, the poet and philosopher king who Jewish tradition remembers as a great musician and composer himself. And the image was created by an Israeli artist whose micro-calligraphy here spells out the entire biblical book of Shir HaShirim, fittingly enough, the Song of Songs. So this is for you. I also, of course, have to include the words and gestures and generous gifts of our extraordinary devoted choir. To acknowledge their appreciation and their love for Anne, the volunteer choir will be presenting Anne with a framed photo of her and of her beloved choir that she can hang in her home. They're also generously donating funds in her name to the Shepherd Society Fund of the Shepherd School of Music at Rice University, which is Anne's alma mater, to support student scholarships so that those students, too, can share the gift of music with those around them. Because of Anne, these choir members, and those not here as well, have learned the joys of prayer through music in ways they never imagined, brought the joy of music to groups for whom they perform proudly as representatives of Emmanuel, and they have thankfully developed a keen sense of community within our congregation. These choir members wholeheartedly thank you, Anne, for the gift you have given them through the opportunity to sing both in entertainment and in prayer. And we have entrusted you with our most sacred songs. You have held them with great love and respect and helped lift those melodies high. Thank you. I'll invite you to
Oh, my goodness. Well, first of all, I can't believe that I've been here 50 years. How can that be? I don't feel it. Can't conceive of it. But in fact, in August of 1966, the pipe organ did arrive, I'm told, and so did I in Houston. And then 10 months later, I was hired as the organist here. Now, I've got to tell you, it was one of my great dreams to get to know more Jewish people, because I came from a little town in Indiana that had no Jewish residence. So only when I went to Indiana University did I meet Jewish students, and I thought, aren't they fascinating? I'd like to know more Jewish friends. So you're a dream come true in lots of ways. And then I came here and hadn't been here but several months and took my resume around to one of the places was University of Houston, where Dr. Horvath was, and he was looking for an organist. And God moves in mysterious ways. You have been one of the great gifts of my lifetime. I mean, enormous gifts of my life. So, I'll compose myself here a bit. It'll always be to me one of the great miracles. It has opened doors to a whole depth of beauty and understanding. The Jewish enlightenment, the Jewish thinking is, I believe, way ahead of almost everybody else. And Jewish music itself is so beautiful. It's changed my life. When I joined the staff in 1967, the golden age, I would call it, of Reform. Don't think I've heard it called that, but I think that's appropriate. The golden age of Reform Jewish sacred music was flourishing. And I'd never heard anything like it, because there isn't anything else like your wonderful Jewish sacred music. It's written for choirs. Of course, I was hired as an organist, so the part I came into was the part that used choirs and organs, and it grew out of an expression of the Jewish Reform movement, the Jewish German Reform movement. So, it began in a country where the culture was predominantly Christian, and it had to find its own way. It began by trying to adapt Jewish text to Christian songs, and that didn't work. So, but over a period of time, the brilliant Jewish composers began to find their way. And they began to explore the organ as their own instrument, and they learned to write for it in a Jewish way. The composers back then, many were still alive, that had come from Europe and from war-torn countries. They have since, of course, almost all disappeared from the scene. Almost all are blessed memory now. One of the youngest ones is Dr. Michael Horvath, who was our director of music for years. He was one of the great, again, a great gift to me, a mentor. I couldn't be doing what I'm doing now without Mike Horvath's direction, and without his explaining things and teaching by example. And so it was, again, a great gift that taught me how to do Jewish music. I especially, another composer, Mike Horvath, by the way, learned to write brilliantly for the organ. And that's a hard thing to do if you're not an organist, because it has lots of strangeness to it that you have to know, a lot of difficult things to it. Yet he learned it, and he's one of my favorite composers for the instrument. Then one of the other composers of organ music that I've loved is Dr. Herman Berlinski. And some of you have met him because he was here with the Dresden Choir. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on him at Rice University, and he became a dear, dear friend and a great mentor. He was a wonderful storyteller. He could tell things in a way that you would remember forever, probably in great Jewish tradition. He was a priceless gift to me. There are so many people to thank for the richness and delightfulness of these last 50 years at Emanu. Thanks, first of all, to the brilliant rabbis, the senior rabbis, Rabbi Kahn of blessed memory, who hired me, and who could, as I was told, and I was right, who could read the telephone book, and it sounded like God speaking, didn't it? Rabbi Walter, who supported and encouraged every part of our music program into his entire rabbinate in the pulpit here. And now Rabbi Hayom, who is leading us into the future with wonderful musical leadership. Thanks for the wonderful staff that have supported us from me and the music program from the very beginning. And then thanks to the choir members here's to the choir. Here to the choir members I've gotten to work with and enjoy. Some of you, I saw Louis out there. Some of you were children's choir members in Emmanuel's choirs, and what fun you were. I see many of you all the time, and I have to look carefully at the eyes to see if I really know you, because I knew you as children. Then thanks to our professional octet, They're one of the finest professional choral ensembles in the city of Houston, and I dare say in all of Judaism. They're really wonderful. Each is a professional musician and a wonderful musician in his or her own right. And then our remarkable volunteer choir, who keeps me smiling, who has developed an expanded repertoire of both sacred music for services and secular music, and also is now performing programs throughout the city, music of Broadway and the Great American Songbook. And one of them asked me if we were going, and seriously, if we were doing something from our Broadway repertoire today. And last but not least, thanks to you, the congregation, for your warmth and love and friendship over all these years. You've enriched my life, and you've made me smile. You are the best. You're a hard act to follow. After I've been here so many years, I automatically, think of every congregation as needing to be that much fun. You're the best, and you know how to make life a banquet. Thanks for all the wonderful memories, and here's to the new chapters ahead. Thank you. Thank you for the gift.
Mazel tov, and we hope that all of you will join us after services tonight for an Oneg Shabbat in Anne's honor. That Oneg Shabbat will be in the Oshman Multipurpose Room, and will be a great chance for us to thank Anne and to acknowledge again her many musical contributions to our program and our prayer life here at Emmanuel.